speaker is Aimee Grimaldi. So Aimee is a project engineer at the Houston Forensic Science Center, where she leads process improvement initiatives for the organization. She has 4 years of experience in project management and 15 years of experience in ISO 17025 in the forensic science industry. Aimee holds a Master of Science degree in Forensic DNA and Serology from the University of Florida, and she is an ASQ certified Six Sigma Black Belt and a certified quality auditor. Aimee's going to be talking to us today about designing a comprehensive quality metric to drive excellence. Aimee, welcome to the conference. We can see your screen, but I can't hear you.
Okay.
Can hear you now.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in today, and thanks to the ASQ team just for organizing everything and all the effort that you put into this conference. We have a great lineup, and I've enjoyed everything that we've heard so far. So today, I'm going to walk you through a design project that we're actually just wrapping up on Monday, and this is a project in which we use MADV methodology to design a comprehensive and actionable quality metric to drive excellence. So in summary, we have started to reimagine the way that we think about and we measure quality. And I wanted to give you a little bit of background on the Houston Forensic Science Center. As you are well aware, Houston is a very large city, or the 4th largest city, so that means our crime lab is really busy. We get a lot of requests per month. And we have about 200 staff members, 75% of those being analysts. But because we are a large forensic lab, and again, 200 is really big for the forensics industry, we have a lot of support groups. So we actually have a dedicated Lean Six Sigma group where we have 3 black belts and 2 green belts that help facilitate projects. We have an R&D department, and we actually have a very large quality division, which is very unique to the forensic field. There's about 7 people in that division that help support all of these forensic disciplines. So we have your traditional forensic disciplines, and they're all accredited to the ISO 17025 standard, which is a huge accomplishment again. So use the chat. Tell me what industry you're in, and what ISO standards do you guys follow if applicable? All right. So next, I wanted to tell you, you may be thinking, right, why and how do you use LSS in forensics? It's a fairly new concept that's been around, I don't know, maybe the last 15 years is when people really started diving into LSS in the forensic field. And actually, forensics is the best place for LSS. Number one is we have very low tolerance for errors, as you can imagine. We're just ordinary people that we come to work and we have these extraordinary jobs. And one little mistake sometimes can have huge consequences on people's lives and even the justice system. So looking back at some of the news articles that you may have seen in the area in the past several years, you'll see examples about how bad science can impact the justice system. And actually, that was the Houston lab back in 2003. New York Times stated that Houston lab was possibly the worst crime lab in the country. And so if you fast forward today, we're possibly the most innovative and progressive forensic lab. The field has called for agencies so that we're more objective, but then also huge focus on quality. On top of everything, as you can imagine, as we get better at our job and aid investigations, we get performed in on more cases, so we see an increase in requests. And in addition, we see increase in crime rates across the country. This year alone, we're seeing a 35% increase in homicide rates. So some cities are actually seeing an increase of 100%. So you can understand what that's doing to the requests that we're getting. But finally, to top it all off, we actually have little budgets to keep up with it all. We run on city funds, and the only way our lab has really been able to sustain this flat budget is by continuously improving our processes and looking for ways to save money or be efficient. And so, as you can imagine, this exactly is the definition of Lean Six Sigma. We want to improve quality, be more efficient, and see where we can save costs. And that brings us to the project that I wanted to talk to you about today. And so the problem that we were trying to solve is that we don't have an effective or comprehensive way to measure quality. And it's really easy to measure production or, the output that we're getting. In our case, this is the output is our case reports that go to our customers. And it's really easy to measure that because we have that information in our laboratory information management system, right? And so as a community in general, we tend to focus and report our turnaround time, which would be, when the case came in the door to when the customer received their report, or a backlog metric. But historically, quality has not been measured in the same way. And I think it's really because quality data, right, it's qualitative and it can be subjective. So we typically see little data come out of the quality of work that's being produced. And so without measuring the quality along with the production, though, it gives the perception to staff that production work is more important than quality, which we know isn't the case. And as you can imagine, when you're kind of measured on your numbers or your output, it can kind of be disheartening a little bit. And so we really need both held in the same light, because for us, it's really about the right answer, and the right time. We need both of those in the same plane there. And so as a company, we knew we wanted to focus on this project because it would allow us to be more objective, standardize the way we measure quality across the entire company, and it would allow us to trend the data, and then obviously that would allow us to continuously improve. And so this is, been going on for about a year now. And so we're really starting that growth mindset, right? Not being satisfied with the status quo. And so that's what we set out to do. Again, we used the MADV methodology, and this time we weren't designing a product or a process, we were designing a metric. So it's very different, it's kind of abstract of what we really were going after when we first started. But we knew that we wanted to make the data visible to all staff, have a transparent view into these quality metrics, and at the same time, as you can imagine, we had to be really careful that we're not sending an impression that all we're doing here is just counting everyone's mistakes. Then we have this little tally on a clipboard or a dashboard going. And so, that wasn't our intention at all. In fact, we know we're going to make mistakes because we're human, and no one wants to make a mistake or miss something. No one's doing this on purpose. And so I think what it's really about, and what the team decided, is it's really about being held accountable for the mistakes that you made. It's about learning from the data and continuously improving your process so that you can prevent this mistake from reoccurring. And so then the team really had to start brainstorming ways that we can be predictive. And we had to think about how could we determine, how could we get ahead of the mistake? Sometimes non-conformances are kind of reactive, right? I mean, we were trying to get really in front of it. How could we get to the leading indicators of quality? And I'm sure, as you all know, that's the million dollar question there. So we kind of had to take a step, just like take a moment, take a breather, and think about this goal. Well, if our goal was to design this quality metric, well, what in the world is quality? First of all, we throw that word around a lot. You're doing quality work, and so what does that really mean? And so the project team came up with this definition of quality, and we ensured that it closely aligned with our company's mission statement. And so we defined it as a passion for accurate and scientific work with a desire to continuously improve processes and performance, and we strive for excellence and exceed industry norms through accountability, transparency, and innovation. So I get really inspired every time I see this definition. I think this embodies everything we were trying to do as a project team here. And, there came a point where we started looking at this definition and we said, well, yes, I think that's a great definition of quality, but I think now we're starting to get into that excellence world, right? Because quality is how we're conforming to our standards. I think this is going above and beyond that. We want to exceed those standards. It's not enough to just, be in conformance to standards for us. And so what we started to think about was, well, this is really excellence too, right? We have a desire to excel for our own satisfaction, and this is where the project took a turn and realized that we needed to go much larger than non-conformances or perhaps a defects per opportunity calculation. We really wanted to take this comprehensive approach. And so the timeline of the project ran pretty long. It started last August, but as you can imagine, we've had pandemics and hurricanes, and we've also moved our entire laboratory last year. And so the project has taken about 1.5 years to complete. So we had a lot of time to complete these tools, though, while the project team was together. And so the next step for us was to determine what components should be in the quality score. And so that's where we turned to the staff, all levels of staff, from the analyst to executive management. And since they are the customers of this metric, we held these voice of the customer sessions with them, and we asked them, what factors impact quality? How should quality be measured at HFSB? And after these voice of the customer sessions is when we started, again, to confirm that, yes, we have something much larger here than when we first brainstormed when we went into the project, because what we heard is quality wasn't just about the nonconformances that was happening. It was also about things that happened on my way to work. You know, something that's going on, and perhaps a family member I need to care for. And, you know, basically, again, we're human beings. Everything we do tends to impact, you know, work in some way. And so what we came to think about is, okay, well, maybe it's really about how engaged I am when I come to work. Could that be another factor of quality that we can somehow get into the score? And so after we got this feedback from the voice of the customer sessions, we analyzed all our data, and then we went into our Kano survey. And so this is really what helped us get those final customer requirements of the metric. And so, you know, the Kano survey helps us distinguish a feature between, okay, is it an exciter, or is it something that you just have to have in there? You know, you're not going to use the score if it's not in there. And so I use an example of buying a car. So perhaps I'm going to buy a brand new car, but I only want a hybrid car. So I'm not even going to consider the car if it's not a hybrid, right? That would be in your must-have category. And so for the staff, what we heard is something that was a must-have was that this data needed to be accurate, reliable, and it had to be automatically analyzed, which that makes perfect sense. We don't have time to do a lot of the data analysis. We need this analyzed for it. So those were our must-haves. Something that was exciting or attractive to the staff was that we have preventive actions in there. And so that kind of really led us down the road of, okay, well, if we can get preventive actions in there, what are other preventive features of quality that we could get in there that would also be exciters? Another thing we saw was that, something that really satisfied people was also that the score should be weighted, because, you know, all mistakes are not counted equally in our field. And so all in all, we ended up with about 21 requirements. And as you can imagine, the team had to be really creative to try to put this all together into something that now was measurable and actionable. And so I also just wanted to mention something, you know, that was very interesting, in that staff actually wanted nonconformances. So either our incidents or corrective action reports that came out of an audit or something that we self-reported. Staff really wanted that in the score, and at first glance we thought, yeah, okay, that's definitely a way to measure quality. But after the team started analyzing that, we felt strongly that, you know, we just talked about this, mistakes are going to occur because we're human, and it's not about the fact that we're measuring something that happens. It's really about preventing it from reoccurring. And so the team kind of overrode that decision and said, no, it's not really about the nonconformance. But I think what it is about is, if you put a corrective measure in place as a result of a corrective action, we need to measure that effectiveness. And so if that same exact scenario happened again, because we really didn't get down to the root cause of that, that's when we would really want to count it in the score. And so I'm sure you can imagine the team was having these really good and awesome conversations, and it was really difficult to come up with the measures that we did. So this is what it started to look like. The prototype started to form, and we had 3 categories. We had professional development, compliance, and then the preventative initiatives. And again, we formed these categories because really we really had this radical hypothesis that quality was more about more than compliance. And so our hypothesis really is that an engaged employee that feels supported and learns and grows at work, could that be, lead to higher compliance? And so we're trying to get to the leading indicators of quality. And so our hypothesis right now is, the more preventive actions that we have, the better the compliance will be. Or, the more we're talking about quality and discussing common nonconformances or defects that we're seeing out of our reviews, the better the compliance will be there. And so, again, we focused on professional development. It was important for us to learn and grow while you're at HFSC, and so we put goals around continuing education and even one-on-ones. Some people do weekly one-on-ones, but overall, as a company goal, we would like management to meet with their direct reports monthly, just to feel supported, talk about things that are going on, what's on your plate, what hurdles are you facing there. And so now I'm going to show you an example of what it's starting to look like. So again, it had to be automatically analyzed, so we went with a dashboard approach. And this is where staff can monitor their continuing education hours against the goal that they have, and we can break it down into how much technical development they're getting. And then we also monitor our one-on-one. So this section is doing just a fantastic job of meeting with all of their staff members monthly to discuss anything. The next bucket I wanted to talk about is the preventive score. And this was our favorite category, really, because we kind of built it from scratch. And so again, it came off of that idea that, okay, well, preventive actions are an exciter. What else can we do? What do we do on a daily basis that leads to just that preventative quality culture? And so what we came up with is we really love this bucket called the quality awareness bucket. And so now anytime staff have a meeting about a section of the SOP, or they're meeting to discuss a nonconformance, have any type of information sharing, just to make people aware, hey, this is what happened, this is the root cause, this is how we can prevent it from reoccurring again. We wanted to document that so we have the date, but more importantly, now maybe this would allow us to do some specific trending. So if we knew that we had a lot of SOP meetings this month, so what? So what is the impact to the compliance data now that you have that kind of in the same playing field? And so this is, again, an idea of what we have for preventive. It shows us the preventive actions going on as a company. This graph or table allows for information sharing. So perhaps another discipline, since we have 8 of them, maybe something that's going on in the Siege Drugs lab, perhaps toxicology wants to adopt it as well because they have a similar process. And here's where we track all our innovations going on. Perhaps that's a validation or a research study on new equipment, and then it can display the impact that it's having to the process and the impact that it's having for resources. So now we can see, okay, well, if you're doing a really impactful project, it's important, but it's taking a lot of resources away from this, who can complete casework. We're just curious, does caseload and capacity, right, does that have an impact on quality? And this is our last category, and it's called compliance. So this is where you're going to find, some of your traditional ideas of quality, and we're going, again, not after the fact that the nonconformance occurred, we're going after, was it repeated? And then we're also including the turnaround time of that. And so how long were you working on that corrective action to resolve and put in place the corrective measures that are needed? And again, we really needed it to be weighted. That was the #1 requirement from our customers, being the staff. And that's because sometimes we'll have a report, and it doesn't happen often, but it's kind of major when a report is amended for a technical reason. That could mean perhaps the wrong result was reported, and that's just a big deal in our field, as you can imagine. And so you can see how that is different than perhaps I have a typo, maybe I spelled the word "and" wrong, in my case notes. We're saying they're both important because they are to us, but one has more consequences than the other. And so this is what the dashboard looks like when we can now look at our compliance data. But again, for the very first time, we're able to see correlations on the same graph. So did the SOP meetings that I had in April, did that have a correlation to any of the defects I was seeing in my reports? or did the defect-free requests go up as a result of having those SOP meetings? And so these are some of the big questions that we're going to start to answer.
Aimee, you have 1 more minute.
Okay, great. And this is our nonconformances. This is where we trend and information share here. And this is our final scorecard. And so everything at 1 page, at a glance, how are we doing? This is where you would want to tune in. And so, yeah, just when we're wrapping up, we're actually rolling out everything next week. So we're completing the project on Monday. And then, as you know, that's where the data party begins. That's where we start to understand if all of these hypotheses that we have, well, you know, they're radical, are they true? And so we'll begin to analyze the data to determine if that our correlations are correct. So we believe that professional development and preventive events have a correlation to the compliance data. And so now we will be able to see if that is in fact the case. So just the takeaways for today, I know you hear you manage what you measure a lot, and I think this is really the case. This is really true in our case. If you're not measuring and analyzing data around something, you're not going to be able to continuously improve it. And I guess I would think about how you define quality at your company, and then think about how you get there and what it looks like. And don't be afraid to reimagine how you define quality. You know, we went for this more comprehensive approach because we really believe that quality is larger than nonconformances and corrections. It's about engaged and growing and supportive staff. It's about that growth mindset. So and find those factors that help you get behind the preventive culture. And that's all I have for you. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Aimee. Great presentation. We have a couple of questions. Some of them have to do with the software that you're using for KPIs and scorecard dashboards and measuring.
Sure. We use the software Power BI. This was another project engineer, Paula Evans, and myself. This is something that we really try to learn ourselves. So it's actually really user-friendly interface, and we learned a lot from just the traditional Microsoft training. And then there's some really great resources out there on, you know, YouTube and Google.
There's another question. How do you solve the issue with the time sink that is required to spend efforts in this area with everyone's busy schedule?
Yes, that's, is it specifically towards the project or just casework balancing, entering all of this? I guess I'll answer the question. How are we, yes, we understand that people are going to be busy, and time is always of the essence. And so I think we don't really have a good eye on caseload and capacity yet. And so that's something that we look to get into a future generation into the quality score. Does caseload and capacity, are we overloading people with non-casework activity that it is impacting their quality negatively?
Thank you very much, Aimee.